You know what cuts the deepest? It's not strangers, not enemies, it's family. My own daughter and her husband looked me in the eye on Christmas Eve of all nights and told me I wasn't needed anymore. They tossed my clothes and fishing gear right onto the snow like I was yesterday's trash. I stood there, 61 years old, holding my boots in one hand and my dignity in the other, thinking, after everything I'd given them, after paying off that damn mortgage, this is how they repay me? And that's when it hit me. If they thought they could humiliate me and just move on, they had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea that I still had cards left to play. And believe me, they would never forget what came next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I remember the cold that night like it was stitched into my bones. The kind of Idaho winter where the snow muffles everything, except the Christmas carols leaking from the neighbor's porch speakers. My boxes sat on the streetlight, glowing like props in some cruel play. The house, my house, was lit up in warm colors. Candy cane lights curling around the porch rails, a plastic Santa waving on the lawn. Inside, I could see their shadows moving to the windows like nothing had happened, like I was already erased. My hands were numb, not from the weather, but from the shock. Alicia's words rang in my ears. Dad, it's time you found your own place. The house is ours now. You've done enough. And Brian, smug as hell, adding, it's better this way. Better for who? Better for them, with their new furniture and their shiny plans. They thought I'd just shuffle off quietly, some old man with no fight left. But as I stood there, looking at the wreath on the door I bought years ago, something inside me snapped into place. They weren't cutting me out of a house. They were cutting me out of my life. And I wasn't about to let that be the end of my story. So I bent down, picked up my old fishing rod from the snow, and whispered to myself, Merry Christmas, Alicia, enjoy it while it lasts. Because the next move would be mine, and it would change everything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my truck across the street, engine off, watching the lights twinkle in windows that used to feel like home. The snow kept falling, soft and relentless, burying my boxes deeper, like the world itself was trying to hide my shame. I wrapped my coat tighter, staring at the wreath I'd bought 10 years ago from a church fundraiser. It was still hanging proud on that door, but now it felt like a trophy stolen by thieves. Around midnight, the neighbors headed back inside from their Christmas parties. A couple waved at me, maybe thinking I was just idling to enjoy the snow. I didn't wave back. How could I? How do you wave when your own blood has just told you you're disposable? The wind rattled the empty beer can Brian had tossed onto the porch earlier that day. It clinked against the wood like a bell tolling just for me. I thought about knocking, about demanding an explanation, maybe even begging. But then his voice came back. It's better this way. I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, and that's when the bitterness gave way to clarity. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a mistake, their mistake. Because legally, that roof, those walls, every nail in that house belonged to me. I'd signed every paper, written every check. They hadn't done the math. I whispered out loud just to hear it. It's still my house. And as the words left my mouth, the frost on the windshield seemed to crack like glass, opening a new path. At dawn, I started the engine. My boxes still sat in the snow, frozen solid. I left them there like a marker, a warning. I knew where I was headed now, downtown, to my lawyer. And when I pulled onto that icy road, I smiled for the first time that night, because Alicia and Brian had no idea the storm I was about to bring right through their front door. The law office smelled faintly of old coffee and pine cleaner, the kind of place where secrets get signed in ink and lives get rearranged. I sat across from Mr. Kessler, a sharp-eyed man with silver hair and a tie that looked older than my daughter. He flipped through the folder of documents I kept all these years, the mortgage papers, the deed, the payments I'd made without missing a single one. His eyebrows rose higher with every page. Finally, he closed the folder with a snap that echoed louder than it should have. Alan, he said, leaning forward, this house isn't theirs. It's yours. Sole ownership. They're tenants at best, squatters at worst. I let those words roll around in my head like marbles on hardwood. Mine. For a moment, I saw Alicia at 5 years old, running to the same living room with a candy cane in hand. I'd built that home for her safety, her future, and now she'd tried to cut me out of it like I was nothing but a draft under the door. Mr. Kessler cleared his throat. You could evict them tomorrow. The law is 100% on your side. Evict. The word was like a loaded gun dropped into my lap. I stared at my reflection in the polished surface of his desk. Was I really the kind of man who would throw his own daughter out on the street? Then I remembered the snow seeping into my boots, the sting of her words. You're not needed anymore. My jaw tightened. I stood up slowly, pushing the chair back with a screech. No, I said. I won't evict them. Not yet. Kessler frowned. Then what's your move? I smiled, thin and deliberate, something they'll never see coming. And as I walked out of that office into the blinding winter sun, I knew exactly where my revenge would begin. I didn't want a courtroom spectacle. I wanted leverage, quiet, surgical, final. So I met with Jenna, a realtor who moved like she had the whole MLS wired to her brain. She smelled like peppermint gum and success, and she didn't do sympathy. She did comps, timelines, and the kind of straight talk that cuts through nonsense. Price it right, she said, tapping her tablet. Fast sale, multiple offers. Christmas to New Year window. People are sentimental. They buy nostalgia. Her smile was a business plan dressed as cheer. I liked that. We walked the rooms together. The living room where Alicia used to curl up under my lap with Coco. The kitchen where we carved the turkey. The window seat with a stupid dent from the time Brian slammed his hand in a drawer. I watched her catalog my life in pixels and numbers and felt a weird calm. This was how you reclaim power in America, not with rage, but with paperwork and timing. I signed a listing agreement, while snow still clung to my cuffs. I told Jenna to stage it soft. Wreaths, warm throw blankets, a fake pie on the counter. Let them sell the dream Alicia had tried to steal. Then I did the other thing people don't see coming. I bought a plane ticket. Not a cheap retreat. Hawaii. My buddy Lou at condo on Oahu. And I could already taste the contrast. Palm trees instead of pines. Surf instead of that thin, bitter wind in Boise. I needed the sun to thaw whatever was left frozen in me. I turned my phone off before the taxi even dropped me at the airport. No goodbyes, no explanations. Just 53 missed calls blinking like tiny accusations on the screen when I checked once, then shoved the device deeper into the suitcase and smiled. They thought they'd seen the last of me. They had no idea I'd sold my silence and bought their surprise. And as the plane lifted over mountains I'd loved, I realized I'd left a different kind of storm waiting under my roof. Hawaii hit me like a dream I didn't know I needed. The moment I stepped off that plane, the air wrapped around me like a warm blanket, salty, humid, alive. Gone was the sting of Idaho snow, replaced with the roar of waves against the shore. My buddy Lou was waiting, grinning under his straw hat, slapping me on the back like I'd just come home from war. Man, you look like hell, he laughed, hauling my suitcase into his Jeep. Don't worry, we'll fix that with sunshine and a little rum. That first night, we sat on his balcony overlooking the ocean, tiki torches flickering, the sky painted in bruised purples and oranges. I let the sound of the surf drown out Alicia's voice, Brian's smirk, the image of my boxes in the snow. For the first time in weeks, my chest loosened. But peace is a tricky thing. The phone in my pocket wouldn't stop buzzing. 53 missed calls. Text stacked like falling dominoes. Dad, we need to talk. Please call us back. This isn't fair. Each one more desperate than the last. I turned the phone face down on the table. Lou raised an eyebrow. Family? Yeah, I said, pouring myself another drink, but not the kind that sticks by you. We toasted to second chances, to freedom, to new horizons. And as the ocean swallowed the last of the sun, I promised myself something. I would not answer. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Maybe not ever. What they didn't know, what they couldn't even imagine, was that while they begged in the cold, their warm little nest was already slipping through their fingers. And the best part? I was thousands of miles away, soaking in paradise, while their panic was just beginning. Days in Hawaii blurred into something close to redemption. I woke with the sunrise, salt in the air, bare feet in sand instead of boots crunching through ice. Lou taught me how to paddle out on a longboard, and though I wiped out more times than I'd admit, each fall felt like a baptism, washing away the bitterness Idaho had left clinging to my skin. But even paradise has shadows. At night, when the trade winds rattled the palms, I glanced at the phone glowing on the counter. The missed calls had climbed past 60. Voicemails stacked up like little tombstones, each one a reminder of the chaos brewing back home. I never listened. I didn't need to. Desperation has a smell. You can sense it without opening the lid. One afternoon, as we grilled fresh mahi on the lanai, Lou leaned back in his chair, sipping a beer. "So what's the end game, Alan? You gonna keep ghosting them forever?" I stared out at the horizon, where the sky bled into the sea. "Endgame's already in motion," I said. "The house is listed. Offers are coming. By the time I step foot back in Boise, it won't even be mine anymore. And neither will it be theirs." Lou whistled low. "That's cold, man." "Cold," I echoed, swirling the ice in my glass. That's exactly what it felt like when they dumped me into the snow. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, basking in Hawaiian heat, while Alicia and Brian shivered in a house that was no longer theirs. I didn't need to lift a finger. The clock was already ticking, every second pulling the rug further out from under them. And as the waves crashed against the reef below, I realized something that made me smile. The sweetest revenge doesn't require rage. It just requires patience. And soon, that patience would come due, with interest. 3 weeks passed before I even booked a return ticket. By then, my skin was bronze, my shoulders loose, and my heart steadier than it had been in years. But beneath the calm, I carried a quiet fire. Revenge wasn't about striking fast. It was about waiting for the perfect moment to let the trap close. At the airport, as I powered my phone back on, the screen lit up like Times Square. 94 missed calls, dozens of voicemails, texts spilling down the glass. "Dad, we're sorry. Please, just come home. We didn't mean it like that." I scrolled through them with the kind of detached curiosity you'd give a stranger's diary. Their panic wasn't my burden anymore. It was the bill they had written themselves. When I landed in Boise, the cold hit me like a slap. Snow crusted the curbs, the kind of gray winter that seeps into your bones. The cab dropped me off 2 blocks from the house. I wanted to walk the last stretch alone, to feel the weight of what was about to unfold. There it was, my old home, glowing against the pale sky. But it wasn't the same. The wreath was gone, the curtains changed, and in the driveway sat a beat-up Subaru with a baby seat in the back. A young couple stood on the porch, laughing as they tried to wrestle a pine tree through the door. I stopped dead, breath cloudy in the air. The sight hit harder than I'd expected, not pain, not loss, but something stranger, satisfaction. The house had already moved on. My plan had worked. And then I heard it, the frantic crunch of footsteps in snow. I turned. Alicia and Brian, red-faced, breathless, charging toward me like debt collectors chasing a mark. "Dad, wait!" Alicia's voice cracked. "Please, don't do this. We can fix it." I didn't answer. Not yet. I wanted them to feel every ounce of that icy air before I opened my mouth, because the real freeze was still coming. They stopped a few feet away, their breath puffing out in desperate clouds. Alicia's cheeks were streaked with tears, raw from the cold. Brian's hand shook, not from weather, but from panic. For once, that smug grin was gone, replaced by the hollow eyes of a man realizing the ground beneath him had vanished. "Dad," Alicia whispered, her voice catching. "We were wrong. We shouldn't have. We didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" I cut her off, my voice sharp enough to slice through the frozen air. "You threw my life into the snow like garbage. You locked me out of my own house on Christmas Eve. That wasn't an accident. Alicia, that was a choice." Brian stepped forward, his tone rehearsed, oily. "Look, Alan, we can work something out. Maybe reverse the sale? You've made your point. But let's be reasonable." I laughed. A hard, bitter sound that made the young couple on the porch glance over before slipping inside. Reasonable? You want reasonable after tossing me aside like a worn-out coat? You don't get reasonable, Brian. Not anymore. Alicia's sobs grew louder, her gloved hands reaching out, but I didn't move. I let the silence stretch. The humiliation of pleading in front of strangers sink deep. That was the first public crack in their pride, and I wasn't about to ease it. You don't get to ask for mercy now. I said, each word measured, deliberate. Actions have consequences. And tonight, those consequences are moving into that front door while you stand out here begging. Brian's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Alicia collapsed against him, crying into his coat. I turned away, the crunch of snow under my boots louder than their sobs, because this was only the beginning of their reckoning, and I intended to make sure they felt every ounce of it. The next morning, word had already spread through the neighborhood. Boise streets have long memories, and nothing travels faster than scandal in the dead of winter. Folks walked their dogs a little slower past the house, stealing glances at Alicia and Brian hauling their belongings into a rusty U-Haul. Their shame was on full display, painted in cardboard boxes and strained faces. I stood across the street, coffee steaming in my hand, watching like a man surveying a battlefield after fight. For years I'd been invisible, just the old guy on the porch, fixing gutters, paying bills. Now the same neighbors who once pitied me nodded in quiet respect. Some even offered a smile. Vindication, American style. Not in fists, not in shouting, but in ownership papers and a sold sign hammered into the frozen lawn. Alicia spotted me. Her lips trembled, her face blotchy from crying. Please, Dad, don't let them take it. This is our home. I shook my head slowly. No, Alicia, it was my home. You just lived here, and you forgot that. Brian tried to salvage what was left of his pride, straightening his back as neighbors' eyes bore into him. You think this makes you look strong? You're just cruel. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. No, Brian, this makes me look free. And it makes you look exactly what you are, a man begging outside a house he never owned. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. The humiliation burned deeper than any argument could. That was public humiliation number 2, and I savored it like aged bourbon. The young couple came out then, carrying boxes of their own, smiling nervously as they greeted me. We'll take good care of it, sir, the husband said. I know you will, I answered, loud enough for Alicia and Brian to hear. And with that, I walked away, leaving them under the weight of every watching eye on the block. The final act of this reckoning was still to come, and they had no idea just how devastating it would be. I left them in the cold that day, but their shadows followed me. At night, I replayed Alicia's sobs in my head, not out of guilt, but out of clarity. She had chosen her side the moment she turned that lock. Christmas Eve of all nights. That wasn't weakness. That was betrayal. And betrayal demands memory, not mercy. Still, the house lingered in me like an echo. Every corner of that place carried ghosts. Alicia as a child tracing frosting on gingerbread cookies, my late wife humming carols by the fireplace, laughter spilling out on snowy nights. They'd weaponized those memories against me, tried to rewrite me out of my own story. And now, standing in the apartment I'd rented downtown, I felt the need to erase their claim once and for all. So I called Jenna, the realtor. Did it close? I asked. Her voice was bright, businesslike. It closed 2 days ago. Full payment, clean title. It's theirs now, Alan. I leaned back, letting the weight of it settle. The house wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a tombstone, carved with a lesson Alicia and Brian refused to learn. Gratitude is the only rent family asks for. And they defaulted. I hung up, staring out at the frozen city skyline. That should have been enough. The sale, the humiliation, the loss, it should have closed a chapter. But something inside me knew the ledger wasn't balanced yet, because I'd seen it in Brian's eyes when I told him the truth on the sidewalk. Anger, not remorse. He wasn't broken. He was waiting, scheming, still convinced he could claw something back. And that meant one thing. The reckoning wasn't finished. So I poured a glass of bourbon, set it down next to the old fishing rod I'd carried from that snowy curb, and whispered into the silence. They still think there's a way out. But soon, they'll understand there isn't. It didn't take long for Brian to make his move. A week later, I walked into a diner off Main Street, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee strong enough to peel paint. And there he was, waiting like a man rehearsing his last pitch. He called me 3 times that morning, left messages dripping with false calm. Against my better judgment, I decided to hear him out. He stood, when I approached, forcing a smile. "Alan, glad you came." I slid into the booth across from him, nodding to the waitress for black coffee. "Talk." Brian leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were co-conspirators. "Look, we all said things we regret. Alicia's heartbroken. We got nowhere to go, and, well, it's embarrassing. You've made your point. But maybe, just maybe, you could lend us something? Help us land on our feet?" I stared at him over the rim of my cup. The audacity was almost artful. He hadn't come to apologize. He'd come to negotiate his survival. "Brian," I said slowly, "you had a house, you had family, you had more than most men your age could dream of, and you burned it all down with arrogance. Now you want me to bankroll your ashes." His jaw tightened, but he forced a chuckle. "Come on, you don't want to see your daughter suffer." I set the cup down, leaning in so close he could smell the bitterness on my breath. I already did. Christmas Eve, she made me suffer first. The diner had grown quieter, heads turning subtly toward us. Brian flushed red, realizing his desperation was now public. His voice cracked. "You're making a mistake." I stood, tossing a bill on the table. "No, Brian, you did." As I walked out, the whispers followed him, not me. Public humiliation number 3, delivered over eggs and burnt toast. And yet, I knew this wasn't his last attempt. Men like Brian never quit until the ground swallows them whole. And I was more than willing to dig the hole deeper. After the diner, I thought maybe he'd finally slink off, find some basement apartment, fade into the shadows where regret belongs. But no, Brian was too proud, too stubborn, too stupid. 2 nights later, I got a knock on the door of my downtown apartment. It was Alicia. No makeup, eyes swollen from crying, clutching her coat like it was the only thing keeping her upright. For a moment, the father in me stirred. The part that remembered carrying her on my shoulders through Christmas parades, the little girl who once called me her hero. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, can we just talk?" I let her in. The apartment was sparse. Bare walls, a couch, a table with 2 chairs. Nothing like the house we'd shared. Nothing like the warmth she'd stolen. She sat at the table, twisting her gloves in her hands, searching for words. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said finally. "Brian," he pushed me. He said we needed space, that it was time to take control. I thought I was doing the right thing. But when you left, when you sold the house, her voice broke. I realized what we'd done. I studied her carefully. She wanted forgiveness, a bridge back. But behind her tears, I saw it. The same entitlement, the belief that words alone could undo choices. "You didn't just hurt me," I said, my tone flat. "You betrayed me. On Christmas Eve. That night will never leave me. Alicia. Not ever." She reached across the table, desperate. "We can fix this, Dad. Start over. Please." I pulled my hand back. "No. Some things don't get fixed. They get remembered." Her face crumpled, tears spilling onto the table. I stood, opened the door, and waited. When she finally walked out into the freezing night, I felt the weight of finality. And yet, as the door clicked shut, I knew this was only the prelude to the storm still building between us. Snow was falling heavy that week, coating the city in a silence that felt almost holy. But beneath that blanket, things were shifting. I got a call from Jenna, the realtor. "Alan," she said, her tone brisk but edged with curiosity, "your daughter came by my office today. She wanted to know if the sale could be reversed." I laughed into the receiver, a dry, sharp sound. "And what did you tell her?" "The truth, that the papers are signed, the deal is done, and the house belongs to the new owners. Permanently." She paused. She didn't take it well. Stormed out crying. Her husband just sat there, staring at me like he was trying to figure out how to sue gravity. I thanked her and hung up, pacing the small apartment. So this was their last card. Appeal to strangers. Try to bend rules already set in stone. Desperation had driven them to bang on doors they didn't own, beg for things they'd already lost. That night, I walked past the old house again. Warm light spilled from the windows, laughter echoing faintly. The young couple had decorated the tree, ornaments glinting against the glass. For the first time, I didn't feel the sting of exclusion. I felt release. That home had new life, new owners who actually valued it. My ghosts weren't chained there anymore. As I turned the corner, I caught sight of Alicia and Brian huddled by their U-Haul, still half-packed, still lost. Their eyes followed me like I carried the last candle in the dark. Alicia's voice cracked across the street. "Dad, please, we have nothing left." I stopped under the street lamp, snow swirling around me like ash. "No," I called back, my voice steady, carrying. "What you have left are consequences, and that's more than you deserve." Their faces collapsed under the weight of those words, the whole neighborhood watching. And as I walked away, I knew the endgame was finally within reach. The following days were almost too quiet. I went about my routine morning coffee, evening walks, while Alicia and Brian unraveled in plain sight. Neighbors told me they'd seen them arguing on the curb, voices rising, arms flailing. Pride was peeling off them like old paint. The same people who once pitted me now pitted them, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone. One afternoon, I stepped into the hardware store downtown, just picking up a few things from my apartment. That's when I heard it, Brian's voice, sharp and defensive, carrying from the next aisle. "We're not homeless, all right? We're just between places." He snapped at the clerk who'd asked if he needed delivery. I rounded the corner and met his eyes. The color drained from his face. The clerk followed his gaze, then glanced at me with recognition. Everyone in town knew the story by now. "Afternoon, Brian," I said evenly, resting my hand on a cart. "Finding everything you need?" He stammered, trying to regain footing, but the clerk was already smirking, shaking his head. The humiliation spread like wildfire. Every shopper within earshot had caught it. Brian muttered something about leaving and stormed past me, Alicia trailing behind with downcast eyes. Their shame walked out with them, a shadow stretching across the parking lot. I paid for my things and stepped into the cold air, feeling the weight of justice settling in. Not revenge for revenge's sake, but justice measured out in doses. Each one sharper because it was public, undeniable. Yet, deep down, I knew there was still one more moment waiting. A final image, something that would tie every wound, every betrayal, every snowfall together in one undeniable truth. And when it came, it would leave no doubt. The reckoning was complete. I thought about my wife a lot that week, about how she used to string popcorn for the tree, humming Silent Night, while Alicia, still small then, begged for one more story before bed. Those memories didn't hurt anymore. They burned clean, like coals that warmed rather than scarred. But standing outside the house one last time, watching the young couple through frosted glass as they hung stockings, I realized the story had come full circle. A family was thriving inside, laughter rising where betrayal once lived. The home was alive again, and I wasn't chained to it. That chapter was closed. I turned, and there they were, Alicia and Brian, across the street, hollow-eyed, shivering in the dark. They didn't speak at first, just stared, as if willing me to relent. Finally, Alicia whispered, "Dad, please, just once more, give us another chance." The snow muffled everything but my voice. "You had your chance. You chose pride over love. You chose betrayal over gratitude. And now the house is gone, and so am I." Brian's face twisted, his pride breaking in the open air. "You think you've won?" he spat, his voice too loud, drawing curtains a twitch. "You've ruined your family. You'll die alone, and everyone will know it." I stepped forward, close enough for him to see the steel in my eyes. "No, Brian, everyone already knows who ruined this family. And it wasn't me." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant carols drifting from another porch. Neighbors were watching, again, and in that silence, Alicia's sobs carried across the street like bells tolling the truth. I walked away, snow crunching underfoot, leaving their shame echoing behind me. But inside, I felt it building, the last act, the final image that would seal everything forever. And tomorrow it would arrive. The morning of my departure, Boise was wrapped in a pale hush, snow falling like ashes from a fire long burned out. I loaded the last box into my truck. Just a few essentials, the fishing rod I'd carried since that Christmas Eve, and a framed photo of my wife, smiling in front of the old fireplace. The rest I'd left behind, along with every ghost tied to that house. Before hitting the highway, I drove past one final time. The new owners were outside, shoveling the walk, their baby bundled in a stroller, cheeks red from the cold. Life was blooming where betrayal once lived, and that image alone could have been enough to close the book. But fate had one more scene in store. Across the street, Alicia and Brian sat on the curb, shoulders hunched, eyes vacant. Their U-Haul was gone repoed, most likely, and they looked like statues carved from shame and frost. When they saw me, Alicia stood, lips trembling. "Dad," she started, but the word cracked and died in the cold. I rolled down the window, letting the silence stretch. Then I held up the fishing rod, the same one I'd picked up from the snow the night they cast me out. I tapped it against the doorframe, a rhythm that cut through the quiet. "This," I said, my voice steady, carrying, "was the only thing you left me with that night. And now it's the only reminder I need." Brian's face twisted, his pride shattering for good. Neighbors paused in their driveways, watching as the last thread of their dignity unraveled in public daylight. I put the truck in gear. "Merry Christmas." I added, calm, final. "Enjoy the cold. You chose it." And with that, I drove off, leaving behind the house, the betrayal, the pain. What remained was mine, my freedom, my dignity, my story retold on my own terms. For the first time in years, I felt whole, and that was the truest revenge of all. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.